Hey, if you're loving Creative Mind, check out some of our past episodes where we dive deep into topics like children's book illustration, video game design, filmmaking, and of course, the most important topic of all, how do you make a living as an artist? So please hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening on so you never miss an episode. And check out the show notes for links to our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube page for even more great content.
To me, it's the same language. It's dialogue. The characters are acting. The only difference is instead of telling the actor, okay, let's try to hit your marks, you're just going to tell an animator, like, okay, this is what the scene's about. This is what the character's trying to do. You know, you're just telling a different person.
That is Emmy-winning filmmaker, animation director, and co-creator of Dragon Frame Software, Jamie Callery. Hi, I'm Bobby Brill, and on this episode, we go further down the rabbit hole of stop motion with Jamie Callery. For almost everyone in the stop-mo world, Dragon Frame Software is part of the standard production line for creating compelling animation. And one of the reasons it is so powerful is that Jamie has spent his career directing and shooting beautiful and artistic animation, music videos, and title sequences. And of course, joining us on this podcast is also Aaron Wadamoos, a stop-motion artist and the stop-mo lead here at the Academy of Art as well. But before we get into it, please hit subscribe on whatever platform you're listening to. Now, here is our conversation with Jamie Callery. Why stop motion? Why not something far easier than stop motion?
Well, that's an easy one. I mean, some people like to work with physical objects. That's all. It's just as simple as that. And if you like to physically pick up a lens and light something and you want to work with real light, that's a world you feel more comfortable with, kind of moving around a set and having the interaction with a bunch of people all kind of working on one set at the same time, or basically you have all of these different kind of artistry, you know, the brick comes together, sculpting and painting and set building, and it depends on what you're doing, of course. But the fact that all these people, they're all craftspeople who have decided, well, I'm better with my eyes and my hands, or I enjoy that more than sitting and clicking with a mouse. So it's not about easy. It's about kind of how do you spend your time? It's like a lifestyle choice. And one is like to deal with, some people want to get paint on their fingernails, and some people see animation as more of like they're removed from it, and they're it's just I'm pushing these light and dark and colors around on the computer. That's just a different way of thinking. But yeah, I would say most of the people that get into stop motion are people who might even go, well, I'm good at sculpting and I also like storytelling. I've always sewn stuff and I've always liked to make things with my hands. And now, you know, there's this medium of film. It's basically film and they like film. And so, okay, I want to be part of that. I know I'm good at making little stuff. So I think that's kind of the draw for most people that they get into stop motion.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think that that's very much it. I mean, it's the place where, there's no rule to it and there's no rule to any animation, but it's very much a craft thing. And one thing I really wanted to ask you about was that, especially in our 180 class, our first entry level class, we have a paper cutout project. And I know this is an area, paper cutout or paper animation seems to be, one of your main things. And I just kind of was curious because I love paper animation. And I feel like that's even a smaller faction. I see it every once in a while. We always show your United commercial. That's like one of the first, the Dragon one, and Heart. And, that's one that's filmed upright too, and we shoot usually flat. Some students do try, that extra dimension. But I'm just wondering, how did the paper thing start for you? How did you come to that?
I've always been around paper. Like my mother was really kind of a crafty person who could do some pretty beautiful stuff with folded paper and paint and whatever you put in her hands. As a kid, I was always around, like she was always paper crafting some pretty complicated stuff. Making something out of paper was not foreign to me. And then I did some work at Cal Arts. And when I was a student, I was just a kid, 18, 19. I was doing photo cutout stuff where I was shooting live action on black and white film on twos, well, at like 12 frames per second. And then I was processing that into stills and then cutting out the stills and then backing the stills and then putting those back into miniature sets and then doing camera moves on them and kind of doing this sort of reconstituted live action stuff that was kind of fun. And I actually did that in the early 90s in the commercial world too. So I was used to dealing with like cut out characters. Like I did that, a ton of that in college and then right out of school. So the early 90s, but that was replacement, right? So I'm just replacing these things and it's very process oriented. Then I did live action for a while. I did a lot of other stuff. And then I was asked to do the Lemony Snicket end titles. And so it was their idea, the people who hired me, that they had already pitched to the director, was a design company. called Axiom, and they had pitched this idea of paper puppets, like little paper cutout puppets. So then they brought that to me, and I directed the sequence and worked with some really talented animators, and the sequence got a lot of attention. That was all, by the way, After Effects work. So that was all After Effects. And we were really kind of pushing After Effects to its limits at that point in terms of like Z depth and things like that, because we were really doing the 3D stuff and we kept breaking After Effects. It's kind of crazy. But then what happened was, someone saw that, who had the United Airlines campaign, the ad agency, and they said, oh, let's find those people. Let's find that guy. So eventually they asked me if I would, storyboard, pitch an idea for United Airlines. And they were like, make it like that Lemony thing you did. So, okay, all right, we'll do paper cutout. So we pitched them the boards. But then I said, but this time I think I'd rather shoot it real. And that was more about getting out. I like to light things. I like to light real things. And the computer, I always feel a little bit straight jacketed in there. I always feel like I'm kind of poking around in the dark, where other people zip around really well in the computer. It's a little difficult for me. Yeah. So I thought, well, let's just do it. And then it'll be more fun, because then we'll like build a bunch of crazy sets, and we'll have to have people with really different skills, and we're going to make a mess. And so that to me is more fun. And so then, so we did it, and that one was well received. Then you get called the paper cutout guy,
So it's
it happens.
I noticed, I just kind of looked over some stuff in like the Shins video. It seems like, it's mostly puppet, but I see you use paper almost like an effect.
Right. We did the rabbit
which is great.
Puppet. Yeah. And, I don't know at what point we decided that, but, I was doing that with Alex Uhas. He was doing all the design work on that. And what had happened is, he is an illustrator, trained illustrator. He did the United Airlines spots, all the illustrations for that. But then there was this period where he was actually playing Dungeons and Dragons a lot with his friends, and he kept making little sculptures. He hadn't done sculpting much before, but he kept sculpting little warriors, and he was just sculpting like hundreds of these little warrior guys. And he said, if we do another thing soon, I want to make some real puppets. Like, let's do some real sculpting. And so that was the Shins video, was his first time sculpting puppets. But then, somewhere along the line, we're looking at the design of it. And I just kind of thought, let's do the rabbit. Let's make that kind of easy and make it more iconic. And, I knew he'd be able to illustrate the rabbit really well. We just get like a rabbit, where if you're making, now I got to make a bunny and a little armature, like, I don't know, right. That's a mess. Yeah. And we already had a bunch of other characters to make. And it just seemed stylistically like it would work. It just seemed like it would work. And I think it did,
Definitely does. Yeah.
That brings up a question, I think, for both you, Aaron, and you, Jamie. There's so much stop motion we see out there, and we've all seen this great stop motion in a lot of commercial advertising where you have a thing in the world that's already made moving. Everybody who's had a Super 8 camera, for some of us who are old enough to remember Super 8 cameras, it was always beer cans or soda cans, G.I. Joes, action figures. I mean, there's that world of stop motion, but then there's the world of claymation, and then there's the world of, like you were talking about, puppets and things with armatures and the things that you're creating from the ground up. What is the aesthetic choice or the influence for that to go that route of creating your own individual pieces as opposed to working with something and kit bashing it and creating a puppet or an armature from that?
It's just a school of thought. I mean, really, like, if you have a love for animation, one of the things you might have a love for is the creation of a world or creation of characters in a space that's never been invented before. So I think it's just an extension of that. And then as far as like the found object stuff goes, I mean, that's almost like its own thing. And some people turn that into an art form, like Pez, with his found object stuff. And he goes this other route of like, I'm going to make this look like that. Like, that's his like whole shtick, which is, I don't know if you guys ever saw his first film, which was like about these secret world of chairs or something. It's like, it is fun college-ish kind of film. I think it ends with chairs having sex on a roof at one point.
I do remember that.
In fact, that rings a bell. Yes.
In fact, I didn't realize.
It's funny the wacky things we see. Like, what was the kicker on that? Oh,
I didn't realize that was him actually.
That was one of his things.
Oh wow. Okay.
So and he's made that like into a whole thing. But animation is wild and varied. Stop motion is whatever you want to stick in front of the camera, really. There's like a weird line between what is stop motion versus like drawn animation, or because you can kind of mix them both. To me, it's right now, it's like anything you can put in front of a camera and it's lit in a three-dimensional-ish way. But some people would consider, well, I guess I would too. Like if you do like sand animation, that's technically stop motion. because you're shooting one frame at a time, you're sculpting the performance one frame at a time. I think that's really the big definer is, are you keyframing? Well, that's going to be CG or hand drawn. Are you not keyframing? That's stop motion. Because you might be aiming for keys that you've planned, but you don't. You're aiming like a live action actor tries to hit marks, or just like a live action. I mean, camera's different because we use motion control. We pretty much know where the camera's going to go. But as far as performance goes, it's much more like when an animator is starting to animate, they go into a slow motion performance. It's just like an actor doing it. It's just moving really, really slowly. And they're just like, I gotta get to frame 93 and the arm's supposed to be up and I'm supposed to be hit the focus point, and that's the big separator, I would say, between stop motion and hand drawn, because hand drawn, yeah, you just lay down and go, okay, I'm going to try to get to this pose, and you can look through them and, start to draw in betweens and all that.
Right. It's very much a performance when you animate something. And on the last thing, I would say you can animate just about anything with stop motion, from sand to found object to whatever. But, a lot of the animators that I know are, even for me, I feel like I've kind of known what my style was for a long time artistically, and everything kind of goes into that. And it's something that's kind of a lifelong quest to build that and develop that. You know what I mean? So everything I try and make is of that style personally for me. And again, I'm very much a hands-on technical person too. I know some of the computer backend, but stop mo to me seems like the most organic. For me, it's the right medium, at least for animating. Well, did that in 2D, some 2D, but
it's like, should be a checklist. Like, do you enjoy taking multiple trips to the hardware store? You might enjoy a career in stop motion.
It's so funny because I think when I'm doing that, I always feel like, oh man, you're the most disorganized person in the world. Like what? But that's just part of it, right? You always miss. Or you realize I need that part, and so.
That was the wrong epoxy. Let's try that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's funny because
epoxy. Yeah.
A lot of times, even in high school, for a lot of people, and earlier, if you're lucky enough, it seems like stop motion is that first thing people try, whether it's that hand-drawn animation or here's some Play-Doh, sculpt something, and we're going to show you how to click, 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 move, click, move, click, move, click, and create something.
Well, they say that like every, I've heard artists talk about this too, that like, imagery and iconic, there's certain visual elements that they already have like energy to them, right? So like if I reach for the Tide box that's on my shelf, well, that thing has been designed the hell out of, so, and I just pick this thing up and I just drop it down in front of the camera. I've just got some free design, and then I pick up the Campbell soup, I've just got, there's a whole team worked on this for a while, and it's been through some iterations. So in a way, the reason that becomes like the first fun thing to play with is you get stuff for free. You get a charge for free. You get the beer bottle shape and the whatever, you get things people go, oh, I know what that is, instead of like, you're drawing and people, what is it? What did you try to make? What is that?
Why doesn't your bird have wings, dum-dum? How come it's not working?
Or as a friend of mine who graduated with an amazing hand-drawn film from CalArts and went on to become a successful director, was asked by her mother, why isn't your film in color? I mean, that was back in the day. I guess people didn't, now everyone's films are in color, but those days it's like if you could get a minute of hand-drawn animation done and shot on the black and white down shooter, that was pretty amazing. But yeah, I guess, that stop motion is one of the first things people try, because it's immediately you get the idea of, oh, I get it, the frames, and then I went too fast. Okay, try that again. Or eases and ease out. It's like you can just demo that in like 10 minutes and someone, oh, okay, I got it. Or here's a bounce. I'm going to make this thing look like it's, it's a great way to demo and learn some real basics really quickly.
Yeah.
Because, you're not going to jump in and start doing a walk cycle or something unless you're brilliant, I don't know.
Yeah. I want to ask you about Dragonframe a little bit. I've been deep in it, for years, but the last 2 weeks I've been shooting every day for about 4 hours. And I got to say, I'm kind of a preacher for your product. I tell people about it all the time. And one of the reasons why is because back in the day, shooting film, when I first started messing with film, it cost a lot of money to even get a little piece of animation, from the processing.
Right.
And then, video taps came in, or people were trying to like press record and stop as, video cameras, But anyway, and then when we first built, I was here,
Did you guys do the lunchbox? Did you guys do the lunchbox?
We did. Then there was the lunchbox, yes. The lunchbox, which, was a lot used for pencil testing in 2D. But then when I was at the Academy years ago, and I just came back like a year and a half ago to Stop Mo, but they were building the department. Well, it was probably a little over 10 years ago, but it was right before Dragonframe really kind
Mm.
of right there. So we were actually using we were using video cameras, something called iStop Motion.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And then all of a sudden, Dragonframe comes in. And to me, it's kind of the ultimate example of how technology has put like the industry standard in people's hands for like a pretty low price, because, you know, anybody can buy Dragonframe for pretty cheap and get to animating pretty quick. So kind of curious, how did it start? How did you even start?
How'd that happen?
With the development
Well,
of it, you know?
well, I will just say to your point, that is part of our belief with our product, is that we make something that it's the same thing on the stage at Leica that someone else can get. So, and you know, sometimes that can be a little crazy because no one's using motion. 2% of people are using motion control or whatever. You know, like there's parts of the program that are actually some of the biggest parts that most people are, you know, kind of get for free and they don't even realize it. So I appreciate that you noticed that. Many people told us, oh, you ought to have all these price points and charge more for the studios. And so, you know, no, it's just one price. Everybody gets the same thing. So that, I'm glad you took note of that.
Well,
As far as how it started,
world. You know, it's opened up it's really opened up the world of it to a lot of people. I know people that work in the fine art world that use it, and people, you know, I've seen a lot of uses for it.
Yeah. And when we were first starting, we didn't know who was using it. I mean, we saw that we were selling, but then I would watch at the time, Motionographer was a good website where people were sending in finished pieces, and I would go, that's stop motion. And then I'd see if they had like a making of, and I'd literally like fine tooth comb, watch the making of it. Sometimes the camera would just, you know,
you
would pan, and I'd be like, go. There's the Dragonframe keypad.
Right.
I see it on the table, like, we did it, we won. How it got started is a long story. Sit back, children. No, it started because I went to Cal Arts, and you know, I was shooting on my 35 millimeter system, and for that, well, that I was just shooting dailies. But then I wanted the 35 system to be controlled by a computer, so I hooked it up with the help of a teacher at Cal Arts named Dale. I want to say Dale McPherson. It's a long ass time ago. Dale helped me out. He was awesome. And he made me a little driver that would drive a motor. So I put the motor on the side of the camera and all that. And then I had this little driver box. For a while, it was just a button, and it would just, and it would shoot a frame. But then I wanted to hook that up to a computer. So I got an old Apple IIe that had a little port on it that I could plug into. And I wrote a basic program that would give me some different shutter speeds and go forward and backwards. It would do a few cool things. And then I brought that, while I was programming that, I brought it home to Ojai, to my parents' house, and my youngest brother, Diami, so I'm about 6 years older than him. I think he was still in high school at the time. He was like way better programmer than me. So he was the mathematician. He had a mind for that. I was just kind of just doing my best. And he said, what do you want this thing else? Do you want it to do? I can make this do some stuff, you know? I said, sometimes I'd like to shoot 2 frames forward, 1 frame back, 2 frames forward, 1 frame back, so I can get like these half frame dissolves. And so he's like, okay, you know, and he wrote all these other things. And that program, you know, then I would add some things and he would add some things. And this was like how I controlled my 35 rig for many years. And like in the early 90s, and I was doing commercials and stuff, I had this funky Apple computer running my system. And then I even rented it out at times, you know? So now at that point, that's not getting to see anything. That's just controlling. It would calculate some basic camera moves that were all hand crank dialed on stuff. And then it would just run the camera, you know? So, and it would keep a really good track of what frame I'm on in the system. So I had this thing called a hole punch, where I would punch a hole in the tests I did and in a dummy roll. And then I would do this like hole punch number, I don't know, whatever it was, but it was a way to like, at any point I could say, go back to this place. And then I could open up the film camera and look and just see like, am I at the punch? Because I used to do a lot of multi exposures on the same piece of film. So anyway, he helped out with that. That was my tool for many years. I did a weird ad for Pepsi, Fruitopia stuff. It was like live action and it had some stop motion in it. Mark Osborne actually worked on it with me. And we needed to do some testing while we were shooting. And Diami, my brother, wrote a little app on the Mac that was it was a frame grabber. So back then on those Macs, whatever they were, those pretty crappy ones, but they had a video in on the back. So you could just plug a video camera in, NTSC, and there you go. And so he made a thing that would just grab the frames and you could kind of reorder them, or you could play them back at film speed, ish. And so that was this other thing that he made. then that went nowhere. I stopped doing stop motion for many, many years. And all this stuff kind of sat for a while. So then when I was asked to do the United Airlines spot, and I said I wanted to do it stop motion, okay, am I going to shoot film again? And we just kind of ran the numbers on, I didn't want to go to LA. I wanted to be in my hometown here in Ojai, and like, okay, what's it going to cost to like take the film every few days down to the lab and then have it scanned? And we just started to kind of think about it. And I had this little point and shoot, but it was a nice one made by Leica, the camera Leica, and had a nice little zoom. I think it was like kind of wide to medium, which is kind of a nice shooting for stop motion. And I said, well, let me just try some tests with this thing. And we shot some stuff sequences and it was okay. I think I just shot like high res JPEGs. I don't think I even bothered with RAW. And then I saw it had a video out on it that was like a live video out, which is pretty rare at that time. Now we take it for granted, but Canon didn't have it yet. Nikon didn't have it yet, to actually get a live view at the same time that you're about to shoot. So I said, hey, can we run this video into the computer? Then like take the stuff, like all the nice things I had from the Apple program, and then maybe some things from the frame grabber, like let's put this all together. And he worked on it. He had a real job that he was working. So on his off time, he would write this little program that would bring in the live view from the Leica, which was something like 320 by 240. Like it was just nothing, little postage stamp. And then I think he doubled it on the screen just so we could see it. So if you watch that commercial and see how smooth the animation is, that was done with the ridiculously low resolution. Anyway, but it did things like multiple pass stuff and like lineup layer. Like it had some really great basic things in it. And then I went and worked at Leica for a little while, the animation company. I could see that, they were working on Coraline. I could see that the frame grabbing system they had was not super great. It was kind of slow. They'd put some work into it. It did some interesting things. They were running these weird cameras. I won't get into it, but basically it would take to get the left eye and the right eye, because they're shooting stereo. I think it took over a minute to get a frame. So, they go shoot, and now it's like, okay, So now I had my little, it wasn't called drag, and it was like Caliri stop motion machine or something. It was like, when I was just my little thing that I would shoot tests. I was in the art department and we would shoot tests on that. And it was actually faster for us to turn around a test with my stuff. Not that they took much notice of it at that point, but I left the Coraline production after about 5 months. It wasn't really for me. I was doing art directing, which is a whole nother story. Wasn't really my deal. And then this guy, Tennessee Norton Reed, he's an animator director. He said, hey, we worked together on a project. And he said, you got to sell this software. This is great. People need it. So talked to Diami, and we kind of, we're from a family that had a lot of failed small business attempts growing up. So we kind of knew not to get too excited or spend all our money. So
all right, I got another wacky idea, everybody. Let's get all the college's funds together and Christmas money. Here we go.
Yeah, that wasn't going to happen. We'd been down that. We've seen that movie before. So we're very conservative about it. It was like, I was on Photoshop, he was on his stuff, and I'm making little buttons and things. And we didn't spend any money on it other than our sweat and time. And then it turned out right then Nikon was coming out with the camera with live view, and Canon was coming out with a camera with Leica right at about the same time. And we got a hold of those cameras right kind of as we were releasing it. And then that was also while I was shooting the second United Airlines spot, which was, I think it was done like a year and a half later. It was quite a while, called Heart. And so we were testing it on that job and kind of putting it through its paces. So I think it was March of 2008 is when we released, just kind of on the website. We put up a teaser website first, which was kind of funny because what happened was there was two big, I won't name them, but there was two major stop motion software companies that were on the PC that contacted us and said, hey, why don't you be our version on Mac?
Right.
We'll just put our name on it.
Yeah, that's what
say it's this for Mac. And we're like, we're going to give this a go. We're going to give it a go.
That's interesting. Going back just a second, my wife and I, Anthony Scott actually gave us a tour of the Coraline set when we were passing.
Nice.
We were coming from Seattle, and I remember those camera setups. And now that I think about it, yeah, I remember I asked him what they were, and he kind of told me, but I can't really remember.
Well, I can tell you what, it's not a top secret thing anymore.
Yeah,
but
he said they were red cameras, right?
No,
they weren't. They weren't red.
They were painted red.
Oh, okay. I remember they were physically red.
It's red-ish.
That's what I thought he meant. I thought he didn't want to tell me what they were. So he said, "Oh, it's just a red camera." So anyway.
They called them the red cameras as a, I think this is before red cameras were really a big deal.
Right, that it was, yeah. So
but what they were technical cameras that they use manufacturing to find defects, right? Like, let's say you're making like a high def TV and it goes by and they like turn on all the green pixels and they turn on, they do whatever they're going to do. And then this thing would look and go, oh, you got a problem here. Or it could be put anywhere. Like, but they're basically high resolution cameras, color, but they had a lot of problems. And it was a little bit, I don't know if it was the best decision. There was Nikon cameras that were really good at that point. I don't know what they were thinking, but I'll tell you what they were thinking. They were thinking, this is awesome technology and it'll last forever. And I think it lasted one movie because it didn't have the underlying technical support to get the image off the sensor properly. Like, you go get a Nikon, like you get all that free, all that programming that's in there, that does all this stuff and processes the image. I think Leica was having to do a lot of the processing themselves, the deburring and all that stuff that I don't really know much about. I think that it was all kind of on them. And then what happened was the technologies and the sensors got to a point where after Coraline, they're like, look, just go get a Canon or whatever. Yeah, so we released in March of 2008. And then it was just a kind of a slow, I think one of our first customers was Cup of Coffee, professional customers. It was Cup of Coffee Studios in Canada. And they were at the time producing a lot of different TV shows. So they needed something. And they were really fast paced. They were just churning out shots there. They needed something that was reliable.
You talked about 35. A lot of us, have never touched film, unfortunately, or very little. When Dragon Frame became what it was, also around this time, all the DSLRs were coming out and you could get real cameras. And, a lot of us were like, oh my, I can finally do time lapse now. And that was, how I got back into stop motion because all these cameras had intervalometers and right. When I was in college, I was working at a big camera store and we were selling them as, hey, this is a time lapse machine. This is a stop motion machine to university, because it was like you could do this stuff finally.
Right.
There was always, the handful of nerds that would come in with the big video cameras and go, does this have an intervalometer on it? Can I do things like this? Can I do frame by frame? And there you would have to know which one was which. But that, I don't want to skip over that because that's a fascinating thing that you went from film to high resolution digital overnight practically, it seems. Very quickly.
Yeah, I never shot video ever, so I went from always shooting film, whether it was a music video or whatever. I was shot, 35 or 16 to then go to digital stills. And in fact, I've just now recently purchased a digital video camera proper for the first time. I've never been a video guy. So for me, the digital stills were much more similar to film frames. The resolution, the quality were, the
interpretation
amazing.
of light, it was like, oh, this is pretty close.
Right. Yeah. You could push and pull on them a lot. And then the computers were catching up to the point where you could really do some great image processing and After Effects with them. And, your color timing and everything, you could do it yourself. It's pretty cool.
One of my closest friends was Bruce Bickford, the clay animator. He passed 2 years ago, and I was with him when he passed. You guys very generously gave him a Dragon Frame setup many years before he passed. It was just sitting, like everything with him, it was kind of on the back burner. When he passed, we had the humongous task of archiving his body of work, taking photos of it and stuff in his house that is up in Seattle. So we went there for a week. We estimated he probably did about 1.5 million clay figures in his life. That's what were in his 2 garages. Not counting the drawings. The drawings were something we got at like about 80,000 of animation drawings. And there's all this stuff being worked on. But anyway, we needed a really quick way to just get it in some light Dragon Frame is
a good way to do it.
We used Bruce's Dragon Frame setup, courtesy of you guys. And then at the end of the day, we'd go back to the hotel room and we'd hit play and we'd get to see all this amazing, you know what I mean? So anyway, cool. What I'm getting at is that, I don't know if there's a ton of other uses, but I found Dragon Frame useful in a completely different way. You know what I mean? It was a great way because just the cinematography window, being able to set everything, adjust things, light changes, comes night, just everything. It was just so quick and at our fingertips. There was nothing else out there for it. So we used it as an archival thing, So
right.
It was,
And you already know the ins and outs of it. So you're good to go. Where maybe if you had gotten like a Capture One, there's
I'm sure there's other things out there, but to me, it just made sense at the time,
and I even think now, I haven't tried it yet, but you can tether to Lightroom, which is, also a great way to
Yeah,
work. I haven't done that yet,
Yeah,
but
we haven't done
I
that.
don't know like the file structure. I mean, with DragonFrame, I kind of know like, oh, this is going to go into a folder, and
Well,
this is
that's the
going to go
thing
here.
is
It's going to be numbered or
I
whatever.
knew exactly. It was going to go in. It was going to be organized. It was an easy way to organize and keep track and make logs and just the
That's
whole
great.
deal. So
Well, that's
yeah.
cool.
So that
Well,
was,
thanks for sharing that.
yeah. If I wanted to tell you one thing, it was that. So anyway, yeah.
That's a great story. That's cool.
Yeah, and also a little
Like
bit more
Bruce
about.
never shot a frame with your stuff, but we
No,
got.
he actually did. I know. Let me get to. I actually gotta say,
There's a payoff. The
towards
payoff
the
has to
okay,
come,
so
Eric.
the last thing I worked on was the Zappa film that just came out. It's an amazing documentary, Alex Winter. You should watch it if you haven't. But it has a lot of old Bruce footage in it that had never been or was just sitting in Frank Zappa's archives, right? But anyway, Bruce was there was some talk of him doing a little bit of animating for that. So I know that a couple guys, they got it going and they shot a few scenes. So there's probably about 20, 30 seconds out there of Bruce Bickford DragonFrame animation that maybe someday we'll see some light. Yeah, so he did shoot on it. He did. And I used it a few times when I was up there too. So
Oh, good.
it got some use. Yeah. One other thing I want to say is that when I first got DragonFrame, I think that the new one, because I don't know what update it was, where you put in things like the drawing tools, the increment editor. I mean, these to me are just like game changers as far as being able to figure out your timing and all that kind of stuff. Are these things that
I
just
think that was three, two or three had the
yeah, I
drawing.
think it was probably 3 or something. But how do you guys get your ideas for updates anyway? Do they just come as a need, or do people contact you, or
It's a little bit like it's like you're building a castle or something. You kind of have to have like the foundation first. Some people are like, I need a thing way up there. Like, well, we're not up there yet, So some of it is just like we had to start with like just getting playback to work and the cinematography space to work and the audio to lip sync correctly on the, like some of it just like the first couple versions, just like get it working on all the different computers with all the different cameras. And there's a lot of things to sort out, not really for me to sort out, but for my brother to sort out with like dealing with all the different camera libraries and everything. And then we were able to then go, okay, well now what do people need, and kind of put in a priority. Yeah, obvious things like, yeah, you're drawing on the screen. Increment editor, I don't know if that was my brother's idea or mine or how that came up. It also may have been someone's suggestion. We get lots of suggestions from people. And also things kind of build, right? They call it in software development, they call it feature creep, but it could be like, we make a drawing tool that makes a nice curve, and then I'm sitting there standing there going, well, can we put some ticks on this? And then, can I ease in once things can kind of snowball where then it's like, are we ever going to release this version of the software? But yeah, so, it just sort of builds. And then there's things like, I wanted to do more with motion control, or people in the motion control industry would say, well, you got this and this is good, but we've got to have these other things that are in our other tools. So sometimes it's just like, okay, well, we've got to try to reverse engineer some stuff. And, that happens mostly in motion control. And then like DMX, I'm not sure, that actually came up from, we were doing a 3D slider thing when 3D was big. And the guy that designed our electronics, Steve Sweetie, he said, while we're at it, we could just throw a DMX chip in here. I didn't even know what DMX was. I'm like, what's that?
DMX means lighting control.
Yeah,
system,
the lighting
right?
stuff.
Yeah.
So I didn't know what that was. And he was like, oh, it's a protocol for like rock and roll lighting. And so my brother and I were like, yeah, do it. So that went in early on into this 3D slider controller. And then that became one of the biggest hits of the software. Then we ended up making a box that just had the DMX chip in it. And, that's kind of a staple now. I mean, that really has blown up, like the amount of stuff that people put on DMX. And then we had to take it from whatever it was, 100 channels, we had to take it up to 500 channels. And now people are putting these multi-fixture, you put a fixture, which is like a light that's got 10 controls, and one is color balance, and one is, like these LED lights. And so then you have to have the UI deal with all those. So anyway, that's something that has sort of grown organically, but it grows because people use it. They go, oh, you put this stuff in and we did this and this, but oh gosh, could we really need it to do this other thing. And then if we hear that more than once from different people, then we open up the hood and start messing with it. Sometimes I just come up with random ideas that sometimes suck. And then some, things, definitely put in things that no one's used. But for the most part, I have a pretty good idea being in the industry and being someone who uses it to know like, oh, I just really want a button here that does this simple thing. And if I draw it up and make a good explanation of it, give a good pitch, then we'll, make it in. But we get a lot of input from studios, and sometimes it's conflicting. Sometimes you never do this. Okay, always do this. Really? Like, you can only do stop motion this way. No, you can only do stop motion that way. Everyone else, it's funny how like these little cultures will pop up. For a while, everyone said your keypad is too small. We can't use it. It was like this weird thing that went from like 3 studios decided they had to get these big geriatric keypads with trackpads because they were all people who were used to using the lunchbox and they needed to go wham, wham, wham with their finger.
You need to use their
I was like,
fist.
you could just kind of go like this, like someone inputting, they can just go like this. It's like not that hard. Then a couple years later, then everyone's using the key, So
the keypad is great. I mean, the Bluetooth one especially, you can just creep it here, put it wherever,
Oh,
it's
good.
Great. It's great.
Yeah, we haven't really gotten a lot of bad feedback on that. We weren't sure, you never know, you put on a new device that's going to work in a different way. Now we got rid of the USB. So now what we have is the Bluetooth.
Yeah.
It comes with a cord. So if you run out of batteries, you can just use a plug in the back.
Hey, just want to take a very quick break and say thank you for listening to Creative Mind. If you have any questions or thoughts, let us know. Click on the show notes for our email or head over to anchor.fm/creativemind to leave a voice message. How does somebody get into the world of stop motion, which is a terrible question to ask, and it's still a very lame question.
There's definitely more stop motion being done now than there ever has been.
Yeah,
for
right.
Sure. I mean, if you look at the output too, if you look at the output of music videos and short films and movies, how many movies? I think there was like 5 years in a row where there was a stop motion film nominated for best picture, right? Or best animated film. So we're definitely at the highest amount right now. I mean, I don't know if it's peaking and going to come down, but there's more stop motion being done than ever, for sure.
And I think that kind of speaks to what I first said, because it is so easy to get, you know what I mean, for price point wise. I feel like has to be part of the reason why.
I think the other reason is what I was talking about before, which is that it used to be that somebody would be like, well, I like to build these things and I kind of like film. And then maybe they're like a little bit nervous about the shooting I'm going to shoot. And then I got to pay for developing. And so now, maybe someone starts on a little app on their phone and they go, oh, this was kind of fun. And I'm going to build a puppet. Like the entryway, there's not like this mystery between the shooting and the seeing it done. And it's not like this crazy expensive thing that they've put in their mind that's going to happen. So I think a lot of it is just that there's always been people who would be willing to do it, but then they kind of got nervous about the film side of it.
Right. Exactly,
because now you have people like, well, I thought I was just someone who liked to sew garments for puppets or whatever, for little dolls. But now I realize I want to make a movie. And so they do it because it's, they got the tool and they can just, also people who tend to like to do stuff like making things on their own tend to like to have their own tools and they like to be in control. So the fact that they're not having to like go borrow a movie camera, we get some lighting and then, it goes to a lab. The fact that I got my camera and I got my lights and I'm got my computer and I can close the door and no one's going to bother me. I don't have to ask permission.
Right.
Anymore.
No, exactly. And I think even with the new, like you being able to tether to the smartphones now, like the iPhones and stuff, that's even opening it up even further to me. Like now a lot more people are going to try it because to me, the thing past, getting Dragon Frame, the next biggest thing is getting the DSLR, right? Spending the money on the camera. But now you can just get the Tether app and, a lot of people got an iPhone
and I don't know how much you've messed with that, but there's actually a few
I've
commercials that were shot with it. And
looks
one
great.
nice thing about it is the focus is that you can animate the focus.
Oh, I haven't messed with that, but
yeah, you can animate all your focus in the motion control section.
Oh, great! I have not messed with that. Somebody just told me about it a while back, so I plugged it. I got the app.
No, you got to start animating your focus bowls and stuff.
Oh, cool!
And it's very repeatable, and it's actually we were dealing with a big camera company about some issues with trying to get their lenses to be repeatable, so that we could control the focus within Dragon Frame and repeat it.
Mm-hmm.
And we sort of teased them, egged them on, like the iPhone does it, we can do it.
Well,
the iPhone does it. Come on, work it out.
Another thing I noticed, Canon now has the R. That's like a stop motion it has stop motion in mind, right? And I noticed that on their, they mention you guys.
So you can get a version with Dragon Frame friendly. We work closely with them.
The firmware, right?
Yeah. So they've got some firmware. And one of the main things it does is it knocks your live view up to 1920 by 1080.
Yeah, right.
That's one of the main things. And there's some other little niceties in there too. You can like access the focus peaking and there's some cool stuff.
You're right. Yeah.
Well, now that you've got all that simple stuff though, I think, the question that I was trying to get more to was, with the technical limitations essentially gone. Cameras are cheap. You have it all in your pocket. That's been a way for filmmaking for a long time. 10 years, 15 years being a long time. If you're going to tell somebody how to be a stop
how to
motion,
get into it.
not how to get into it, because that's a loaded question, but how you direct stop motion for somebody who goes, I understand a human, but I don't understand this thing that somebody else is creating and animating. How do you direct stop motion? What's that thought process?
Well, yeah, I've done live action and animation. I don't really consider them to be really different. You still have the same process that you got to plan out what your shots are. Well, you have to be more of a planner in any animation, right? You can't just be like, oh, let's shoot it from the left and then shoot from the right and pick our favorite one. You got to go, okay, we're 2 seconds here and then we're 4 seconds there, and then we're going to go to wide. Like you got to, or you spend a lot of time reshooting things. So you got to be a storyboarder, you got to be able to think like a filmmaker and an editor, which you could learn that by watching just live action films. You don't need, it's not specific to animation. It's not like animation's cut differently than live action. Animation is always kind of chasing after live action in a way, because in live action, you're free to experiment more. So you're going to get more iterations of experimentation in filmmaking in live action. So animators are always looking at live action. Okay, what are they doing? Oh, that's an interesting way to cut these things, whatever. But as far as just like storytelling and filmmaking, you could take a classic Disney film and literally just take the boards and go, okay, go shoot this live action. And you could, you'd be good. To me, it's the same language. It's dialogue. The characters are acting. The only difference is, instead of telling the actor, okay, let's try to hit your marks, you're just going to tell an animator, like, okay, this is what the scene's about. This is what the character's trying to do. You're just telling a different person. That's all. And you're not going action. You're going like, okay, I'll see you in 3 weeks. And see how it goes. You have to be more fine-tuned, because you don't want to set somebody in a direction of animating something just because you had like a little momentary idea
of brilliance,
spark of idiocy, and then they do it, and then you go, yeah, you know what? Let's go back to what was in the original script after they've tortured themselves on some really difficult acting. So I think it focuses you more when you're directing animation, because you don't want people to waste everyone's time. It's it's probably very similar, especially stop motion has got a cousin, and they're buddies, and that's old film effects, right? So film effects, Star Wars movies, all that stuff, not just the creature stuff, but the spaceships and anything that's shot one frame at a time, where you have to go, we got to get from here and we got to get to there. All right, let's try, let's program in some move, or whatever, let's see what happens. And you got to tell a bunch of people what you think's going to happen, and then you got to shoot it and go, oh, actually, for the editing, let's take 5 frames out of the whole move and shoot it again. You got to be able to know what frames are. I guess, you got to kind of think that way, or you got to go, you know what, this would be great. Just pull that frame out. And then suddenly something has a nice little kick to it. So understanding how the principles of animation, the principles of filmmaking, that now you just watch YouTube. There's like a million, there's a million things about filmmaking. Plus you can watch any film scenes over and over again. I remember I used to, at CalArts, I would sit, they had these little cubicle kind of cozy areas where you could go tell somebody like, I want this area, and play Laserdisc when you tell them the Laserdisc, and then they would play some film for you. And I think maybe you had some controls, you can go back and forth, but we're just sitting there like watching like a great scene from a movie over and over again to like, oh, how's the cutting, and when are they deciding to do this and that? And it's the same thing. Now you can just do it on, on the internet, but to me, they're the same. It's just like, you have to have a little bit more skill maybe in the understanding animation principles if you're an animation director, and you have to have a little bit more human skills maybe, and like patience and stuff if you're on set. Like you have to be able to kind of get everybody on board at the same time with the same enthusiasm, all to hit at once. And sometimes with animations you can kind of like, okay, well, now we'll do this part, now we'll think about that part, and you can kind of parse it out a little bit more, I guess.
And from the business side though, because I want to switch to that, because that's equally important, if not more important sometimes. When somebody is coming to you and going, hey, I want to hire you, I want to give you money to make some animation, what's some of that basic things that you're thinking about that are different from some of the live action budgeting and planning?
Yeah, I guess the big thing would be, where's it going to happen? Where can it exist for a few months? And how much will it cost me to put people up during that time? It's probably very similar to, for instance, I bet if someone looked at the budget for, let's say, like the Shins video, someone might look at it and go, well, this is similar to like a really simple indie feature in terms of it's going to take you 3 months. You're only building sets in this one area, and I have to put people up. we got to put the actors up in town for that amount of time for 3 months. It's like probably kind of similar. We got lights to rent. There's things that aren't involved, like there's no sound boom guy or whatever. But yeah, live action, you could knock out a lot more quicker, right? So yeah, you shoot your music video in 1 or 2 days. Same music video, stop motion is going to take you a month at least, maybe more if you're trying to. It also depends on the style, right? And I always do this horrible thing of like, I'm going to tell a story, which means I need this shot and I need that shot. I'm not just going to like do some wallpapery pretty stuff that we could just kind of repeat and maybe, shoot something else, like I'm always trying to get these like specific, like it doesn't make sense if you don't have this 2-second moment. We have to shoot that. And then they end up spending.
I need my establishing, my close-up, my reaction. Come on, guys, it's a story here.
Yeah, you have to, I was trying to make these little weird things happen. So story-wise.
It seems like everything you do, like the small commercials and the videos, they follow some kind of narrative. A lot of times music videos, they have that kind of freedom to
Much
be a little
smarter.
more abstract, a little bit more visual,
Yeah.
A little bit,
Much better way. Because you just go, oh, we didn't get that idea. Yeah, all right.
Right,
Just
right.
loop
I mean,
it.
yeah, cut
Put
to
some
the band.
candles.
Cut,
Yeah.
show the band playing right there.
Yeah, show the band. Cut to the
So the band, some candles, and we're good. That's all. That's really all you need. It's a music video.
Right.
What was it from the 80s? The White Horse on the Beach. Just
Oh,
have that run through. You talked a lot about cameras and stuff, and how much does the cinematography change? Because I mean, that seems to be something that it sounds extremely important to your background and how stop motion is made. Looking at the cinematography and thinking about the cinematography, both with Dragon Frame and in stop motion, how does that play a role that may be different from live action, or how much more difficult is it to work with the cinematography in stop motion?
One thing to keep in mind is that like the lensing is all the same. So if you want a wide kind of shot in live action and I were to frame a human being and get a feel for them, if I took a puppet and put the camera in the same proximity, you get the same result. Like it's just all scaled. You just scale down, but you use the same lenses. You still call out the same kind of, oh, I want a little longer, I'll go to 85 or whatever you're used to for the sensor you have. So that's the same. Lighting principles are the same. It's a little easier with stop motion because you're like God. You're just like, oh, let's put this light here.
That's what I was gonna say. I actually, because of Dragon Frame, I mean, I find fine-tuning cinematography is a lot easier than it is whenever I've tried to shoot my stuff. I do. I think those tools are great. I can tune everything.
Right. You have the ability to just like, oh, shoot a test frame. Okay.
Yeah. Or, maybe we'll leave the shutter open a little longer here. Just,
Right. Lots of fine-tuning and noodling you can do in stop motion. Yeah. So what's different? Obviously, I get the biggest difference is the optical difference of when you're closer to a lens. So the lenses are optimized for this sort of human distance. And then now you're in a set and now, sometimes we have to often throw like close focus diopters on the lenses. Also, once you
I was going to ask. I mean, I always imagined that you were doing it. At least the first time I did it, it was like everyone's using a 50 millimeter macro, and that was it because you were so close. But you're actually talking real lens selection. Is that?
Yeah, I mean, lens selection is very similar to live action. You're just like, what do I want to see in this shot, and how much of this are we going to pre-plan and squish the set to kind of fit, versus it's the same ideas. Now, the one big thing though is that if I'm on a particular lens, let's say I'm on a 35 millimeter lens, and I am 3 feet away from an actor in real life, and then I'm at f5.6 or something, there's going to be a certain distance behind that's in focus, whatever that is. And then if I proportionally shrink that down and I put a puppet and he's only a few inches in front of the lens, but it looks basically, it's the same shot. The focus at that close, the depth of field isn't the same. So it's like you have to close down more to get more depth of field. So that's a little bit of a fight sometimes that's why, what makes something sometimes look like a miniature, like those things that they would do with the tilt shift, is when you have very thin focus on something, you go, oh, it seems really small. And that's just because our minds have watched so much footage, and we know that when you get close to something, everything goes out of focus, because it's just the physics of how lenses work as you get closer and closer to the front. So that would be one difference that you have to take into account. I tend to shoot a little bit more open than other cinematographers in stop motion. A lot of them just go to 16 all the time. Like most Leica stuff is just close it all the way down, get everything in focus. If you look at the Little Prince, I would be at f4 a lot, or, I would go in close up and just like let everything fall away. And, sometimes that was for effect. And sometimes it was like, I don't like that set very much back there,
Well,
Yes.
that was actually another particular thing I wanted to talk to you specifically about The Little Prince. Is you have a lot of blue screen portions or portions where you're compositing in stuff. That seems something like that's just somebody looking. It's like, well, why would you do that in stop motion? But it does seem like how much stop motion from your experience is incorporating that, because that obviously you're trying to get rid of the rigging and some of the armatures and the fishing wire and all that, but you're using it in a different more in a cinematic way, correct?
Oh gosh, I don't think I'm using it in a more cinematic way. It's the same problem. It's like, how wide is this shot supposed to be? Like, okay, do we want to paint a 40-foot backdrop for this? Or do I just put up a little blue card behind them? It's like, it's the same thing. Just like if they were shooting the Avengers, it's like, are we going to build the whole city or do we put them on green screen? It's the same idea. It's just like, how much stuff do we have to build? Same rules apply, I guess. And then there's other things that we do to make ourselves look good later, which is like, sometimes we can shoot multiple exposure. So it's like the same frame, like frame 1, exposure 1, frame 1, exposure 2, right? The camera doesn't move. It's like nothing's animated change, but we can tell DMX, hey, put this light on this exposure and then put the fill light on this exposure. Okay, so now I'm in post. Now I've just got a slider that can say like, how much fill light do I want? Because I didn't want to decide. No one was willing to make a decision on the set, or maybe they wanted it to be too bright and I didn't like that. So now I've got this slider and I keep pulling it down until someone yells at me. I'll just keep processing the shot. So there's ways that you can do that and I know of some films where they'll literally have what they call a chopper, which is motion control can be told, hey, for this exposure, go move this thing into this position. And it'll have a green screen on the end. So you got your character and then this thing goes, and then they shoot an exposure. So now they've got a mat on this character for the whole shot. So if somebody later goes, let's put some fog behind them and this in front of, they can actually separate the character, even though they didn't shoot them on green screen, they shot them in the set, but then they have this extra exposure with this arm. We actually did that in the United Dragon spot. We did it by hand. We put these cards behind the characters on some of the shots where we needed to multiply them and they couldn't all fit in the same shot. So we had to shoot multiple shots, but then so it's kind of cool because you pull the mat from the green screen, but you don't have to clean green screen off the characters because you're just using that to cut out what already is a clean exposure. So we do that a lot too. That's a fun trick, but it can get crazy too. They can say, oh, we're doing 20 exposures for some shot because we want this separated and we want this light that's flickering to be separate. You can cause more trouble, really, personally.
I have a little Arduino setup going at the school, and I've been repurposing old tracks and buying linear bearings and kind of putting together some motion control stuff. And I was just wondering, have you heard about it? Because I know there's a guy in France, Kinetic Armatures. He makes some really interesting motion control stuff that I know he just sells it. Have you heard about people around the world coming up kind of with it? Because the Arduino is what you can buy. They're like $15, or you can buy second, third party ones for $12, and you got your engine for it. You guys give us the code. It's pretty inexpensive to put together one of these motion control things if you're creative. So have you heard any of that?
Well, I'd probably ask my brother because he's
okay.
He would probably rub his head and go, these are the people I get the most calls from.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah. I think he said it's like motion control is the least used and the most support calls because it's complicated, right?
Yeah, it is complicated.
Arduino is, I don't use Arduino. I use our DMC 16s. So I'm not a good person to talk about the Arduino. In fact, sometimes I get
interesting,
upset. Like I'll go to like the big studios and they're like, well, we made this Arduino setup. I'm like, buy our DMC 16.
I make a box for that, so you don't have to make it.
Well,
guys.
It's true. Yeah, I know. I can see this too, but it's interesting just for like the guy who that on the budget who wants a motion control. He can spend. I mean, you can literally put something together. I bought all for under $100. You can get all the parts.
I think was it like a pan and tilt thing, or what were you doing?
Yeah, it just drives stepper motors, so you can put it on a track. You can use it for external things. You can do pan and tilt. So I'm still messing with it a lot and seeing how much I can get away with. But I love doing stuff like that.
Watch all the motion control tutorials. There's we've added some new things. Dragonfly 5
have you?
coming out? And
cool.
A lot of the new stuff has to do with like full on virtualized rigs and stuff, but some of it will apply to what you're doing too. That's cool. I think there's a lot of people using Arduino. I see little videos every once in a while. And like I said, I think my brother says there's quite a bit of calls coming into support about that.
Well, maybe I didn't know that was possible. I'm going to be calling you guys.
No.
yeah, Jamie, give me
Actually,
your phone number real quick.
I did know it was possible, but I didn't think about calling.
This, to everybody out there, all the Dragon Frame users, if you run into a real bug that you've confirmed, like, yeah, this is a bug, you can go up to our help menu and say report an issue, or I think that's what it's called, report. Yeah, and it goes directly to our team. We find out about it, and what it does is if you check the right boxes, it will send us like kind of a snapshot of what you were just doing in the program. Because a lot of times we don't know, like, how'd you get there? How'd you, like, what was your crazy route to have this crazy thing happen? And so then if we can see that, sometimes we can turn around updates like in a couple days on stuff. We're very responsive on that.
Yeah, my experience with you guys are our guys, you guys have gotten back to us like same day, same hour. We get answers from you guys super quick whenever we need them. So
we know that like studios and people doing real productions at any moment could probably use the update, could use a fix if there's something funky. So we try to make it happen fast.
Again, I'm going to ask you another, impossible question as we're kind of wrapping up. What are some things that you see happening in the world of stop motion, Jamie?
The future of stop motion.
What's happening? What do you think that's changed in the short amount of time since Dragon Frame has come out, and as there's been this, explosion of stop motion that seems to be, here to stay? What are some of the good things that are coming out or that you're excited about?
I think the best thing is that you get these more individual voices and you get these stylistic ideas that are different than what you normally think of as claymation or puppet animation. You've got a lot of experimentation going on. So you get all kinds of character design ideas. You get different forms of animation, different pushing the cutout thing. Really beautiful film by Sean Pecknold a bunch of years ago that he did just really like kind of push the boundaries of cutout stuff. And I think that's the result, is that you get these total flourishes of different styles happening. As far as the future goes, technically, I don't know. I mean, we're always kind of asking ourselves that, will there be some divergence from, like, will people just stop using the DSLRs and just start using their iPads or something? I have no clue. But I will say that there are some things that have come and gone. Like, no one is asking me for a 3D slider anymore. Like, that died. I think Frankenweenie was the first. There was a bunch of films that they did 3D, and I think Leica still shoots 3D, but I'm not exactly sure. But Frankenweenie, they decided, no, we're not going to shoot 3D. And that was kind of at the tail end of like this real 3D push after the James Cameron movie.
Yeah, but I think 3D just kind of ebbs and
I almost forgot about it. It was like the thing. Everybody was doing it for a minute.
But 3D's, I mean, that's a whole other, rabbit hole.
Well, I was going to finish the thought is that on Frankenweenie, they decided, let's save the money. It's so much trouble to make the amount of stuff you have to worry with 3D, the depth of the set, every shot, you have to like animate the interocular change, like all this stuff that really, and then the post is a pain because any kind of like rig removal, you have to have a special tool to remove it with the left eye and the right eye so you don't get some weird wiggly woggly going in between. So Frankenweenie, they said, we're just going to sub it out to a company that's gonna 3D-itize it for their 3D release. And then since then, I don't really know how much 3D projection has been happening the last 3 or 4 years. Even before COVID, it seemed to kind of die out, which, you know what, as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. My personal opinion is that 3D is kind of fun, but it's not essential to the cinema experience. It's not, I don't remember things in 3D, like even my own life. I don't remember like, oh yeah, this was in front of this by this much. I just kind of remember, my memories are sort of 2D in my brain. I don't know how other people are.
If watching it in 2D was an option, I always took that option. I was never into the 3D. But I got to say this, in Tokyo, I've seen a couple movies in 4D. Have you heard of this?
Uh-oh.
It's when your seat is also
take shrooms when you do it?
Well, that's the whole
that's
method.
5D.
Yeah, that's 6D. No, it's when your seat is like a ride.
Oh,
and
yeah.
And it like sprays you with water. And I didn't know that. I went to go see a movie with my friend there, and he said
you didn't know it was going to be happening?
I did not. He said, we're buying it in 4D. I sat in the seat, and then all of a sudden the splash screen that shows you, like the THX, what the theater does, all of a sudden my seat popped up and it took you, and I was like, wait a minute, we're 2 hours of this? And they had people, you can't have anything in the aisles, and it's just, so that's 4D. So you guys got any plans for 4D?
Are you allowed to have popcorn? Are you allowed to like have...
You are, but you got to like hold
it.
You got to clutch it. Yeah.
4D.
All right, Aaron, any last big questions we can pick Jamie's brain on?
I don't know if I have a question, but I just want to say, like what you're saying, it's the future of stop motion. I don't think or look into those things, but I've kind of known you guys have a huge user base out there. And I think that, like you said, it gives, when I was growing up, I always knew I'd animate, I'd draw, I always knew, but it was always a matter of, okay, how am I going to do that? And in the early days, it was Super 8. And to me, Dragonframe took that away. You know what I mean? That's my way. Even before, I still not great at digital drawing, I was using it for pencil test. The Dragonframe just kind of cut out all that worry. It was just the way I could do it.
Great to hear. Yeah. I've had a couple people who, youngsters say, who went, Dragonframe was there when they got to college, and then they'll go, what did people use before this? Like they kind of have like this empty history. It's like, and I just go, nothing.
Well, it didn't exist.
I think another huge thing about it was that those stop motion programs that we were using before, like the ones I was saying, like iStopMotion and stuff, they were just building the film, and afterwards you exported the video, and they weren't saving the frames to do all the post in, at least the ones that we had. That was the huge, so you had to constantly save, while you were making.
They were holding everything in memory for you.
Yeah, so you had to save. And Dragonframe, if it crashed, I just say, oh, well, I got the frames are taken. They're still sitting there. I just need to start. And it doesn't really crash that often from what I remember.
It's okay.
So,
you can say the word crash.
No, but I really don't. It's pretty stable,
So when we were trying to decide if we should venture into this business, we had to look at who was making software. And, we looked at iStopMotion, and I think I remember my brother going, oh, there's this program. It's pretty popular. And it's okay, let me take a look. And then one of the things it didn't have a way to just like step to live. Like you couldn't just go frame live. It was like frame onion skin over your last frame. So you couldn't get that thing that animators, that's, by the way, the great kind of joke, which is that nobody uses onion skin to animate in the professional world. I've never seen the onion skin is not on. It's only on sometimes if they have to line something up, because what they're doing, the people who are the best, they're just looking at how does the last frame cut to the next frame? How does it feel when it jumps to that live? And that's when they decide to commit to it. If you always have like a DX over it, you're never getting that. It's like trying to play two notes. You're trying to figure out a melody, and you're playing the last note over the next note. Like you would never hear what the melody is. And so that was something I didn't particularly understand until we did the United commercial. And I had a real animator, like a great animator, this guy, Kim Blanchett. He said, oh no, I got to have this tick, tick, tick live. I got to have that. I'm like, okay, we'll put that in. So that was one of the first things he asked for. Then when I looked at that, and there was another program that they hadn't figured that out yet either, I thought, well, I think we're in a good place to just immediately have like a real trained animator look at this and go, okay, I'll take that over these other ones. There's a few other things too, but yeah, like you said, like just put it in a folder. This isn't where you're going to make your movie for your friends. You're going to be a professional, and you're going to keep these frames safely somewhere. Yeah, there's like little cues like that someone who's been in the industry would see. And that's what we tried to do. We tried to make it so that we never tried to sell it to kids or to like get your grandmother to buy this for you. It was always, if we got the pros to go, yeah, this is the thing, it would be trickle down from there, word of mouth, and that was kind of if we had a business plan, that's what it was.
Jamie, there are a billion more things that I want to pick your brain on, but I can't because we have somewhat of a limited time. But it's so important that, really, aside from, how awesome Dragonframe is, it's great to talk to somebody who's actually creating stop motion for a living.
Oh, thanks.
Aaron, thank you as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's nice to meet you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. I'm really happy to finally meet you. I've been wanting to meet you for years, so it was great to meet you.
So there you have it, another voice in the world of stop motion with some great advice on building a career in art and design. And because more and more art and design career opportunities are on the rise, and because employers are always on the hunt for the next generation of talented and skilled creative professionals, here at the Academy of Art University, you will get those work-ready skills that employers want. You can study on-site in downtown San Francisco or anywhere in the world with our online programs. To request more info about our 40-plus areas of study in art and design, including game development, animation, film production, and more, just visit our website at academyart.edu/creativemind. I'm Bobby Brill. Thanks for listening.